Jack, why ain't nothing in your book?
Goodness.
Yeah.
I think I am having a call.
Charlotte.
Hmm?
Oh, wait, something on. We're on in a minute. So you got the answer for on page 1 at the bottom of the page.
Wait, one.
Uh-huh.
Mm,
Good morning.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not. I don't
Okay,
think
that's
I can get the answers. I have the follow along.
you just had the you had to follow on.
I have the lesson, but I
Okay,
can't
we'll put
get
that up
the answers.
when we get ready.
Jordan, I can't get the answers up on my screen.
in the New Testament. This is redemption in the Old Testament. And so we looked on last week at three ways that Ruth demonstrates or shows us this redemption. God is always at work. That is a proper title for this lesson because Ruth and Naomi and the other characters in this story are always at work. So we want to look at, we also looked at who were the Moabites. The Moabites was a tribe of people in the eastern part of the country of Judea. They were a pagan people and idolatrous people, but they were kin to the Israelites. They were kin to the Israelites through Lot, the nephew of Abraham. And so they were kin, but they were enemies also. And so it's bad when you're enemy with your kinfolk. But this was the case that they were enemies with the Moabites. It also indicates that the Moabites had got land that the Lord had given them. Just because of Lot's, the Lord made a promise to Lot that he would inherit this land. And so the Israelites needed to go through there to get to where they were going, which was the promised land. And they wanted to go through and destroy the Moabites, but the Lord told them not to. And so then they had to find a way to get through the land without destroying the Moabites. And so we also dealt with what is the significance of Ruth in world history. Now, this is the focal point of the lesson. Ruth being significant in world history is because that she turns out to be Jesus's great grandmother, and so that's very significant. Who would have thought that the Lord would have took two unexpected people like Naomi and Ruth, and they have such an impact on history. But that's the way the Lord works. He always takes the smaller things and do big things with them. And so then he takes these two insignificant women that we would never thought would be even brought up in the Bible, and he uses them. And the book of Ruth is only 4 chapters, but they're 4 powerful chapters. And they're not even the minor books, or they're not even major books. It's not even a major book or a minor book, which is considered a major book. It's considered because of the writings in it. The extensive writing in a minor book is less extensive. This book is only 4 chapters, but it's a powerful book. It's a powerful book. And so we want to look at a few of the highlights. Who were the Moabites, Sister Jackie, at the bottom of the page? 1.
They were political enemies.
They were political enemies. Great. They were political enemies. Who started the Moabites? Down at the bottom of page 1.
Ruth.
Read where it said Ruth was a Moabite.
It was Moab. I mean, these were pagan people living east of the Jordan River. A man named Moab was the founder of this nation and distant relative.
Okay, so the Moab was founded by Moab, right? And who was Moab? How did Moab come into existence?
He,
Like, well,
he was
Memphis?
You remember that when?
Ruth's son.
No,
Memphis.
he's Ruth's. That's Ruth's grandfather.
Uh,
Moab was the son of Lot's oldest daughter, right? That he had with his children. Lot had went into his children. The children thought that they were there. His line was going to be distinct, and so then they had children, and so then Moab comes from Lot's oldest daughter. Okay. And so the Moab, the Moabites, right, inherited the land, and they had a land that was real good for grazing cows and for agriculture, and so then the Israelites wanted to take it, but the Lord wouldn't let them. Okay, and then we said, what was it like to live in the time of the judges? Do we remember who the judges was?
The prophets.
They were prophets, right? They were prophets. Instead of having kings, they had judges, and with the judges, they did administrative work for the Lord. They as far as judicial stuff, they were the law, and so the judges was the law. And then what happened in the days of the judges?
They were wild. They were doing.
There you go. Yeah.
They were doing whatever they wanted to do.
Okay. They did whatever they thought was right in their eyesight, right? And so then this was a disgraceful time for the Israelites because they mingled with the Moabites, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we say they mingle with the Moabites, what are we saying, Jay?
They were doing what
they were doing pagan worship. That was the main thing. That's what the Lord got upset, because they started worshiping other gods. And the Moabites had more than one god, and then they led the Israelites into idolatry. And so they were doing a pagan worship, and the Lord got angry. It kindled the Lord's anger. And so then he gave them over to the Moabites for a season. Do we know how long he let them stay in at the bottom of page 2?
18 years.
18 years. He allowed them to be in exile for 18 years. And so those were the 3 things that we studied on last week. What was it like to live in the time of the judges? We also studied who were the Moabites, and then we studied what significance did Ruth make in world history. And then that brings us to our lesson on today on page 7. The chaos of tragedy and grief, right? Jack, will you pick us up there?
God leads us through seasons of life, spring seasons when exciting opportunities for investment arise, summer seasons when we labor to nourish and protect our investments as they grow, fall seasons when we celebrate the fruit of our labor, and winter seasons when we just hunker down and survive. Proverbs 6:6 instructs us to consider the wisdom of the ant. What does the wise and ant do in the summer and fall, according to Proverbs 6:8?
We have our answer available. Okay. And what does it say, Jack?
Ants prepare food in summer and gather it at harvest.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the ants labor, they work hard all summer and gather food for the winter. That the Lord told us to consider the ant. So that's wise, right? It's three things we could pick up from the ant, right? In the book it calls them the wise ant, right? So then that's wise to store up things for the winter, right? Also, the other thing that an ant is, he's diligent, right? He's working all the time, right? This is a word picture of Ruth, right? How the ant worked, Ruth worked the same way, and then also he prepared for the future, right? It's always good to prepare for the future. I have in my notes, I was going to ask, do we have a bank account? It's always good to have a bank account, right? It's good. That's wise to have a bank account, and it shows diligence, right? Because you're preparing for the future. And so then all a good Christian would have something laid to the side, all right? And so then there's three things we could see from the ant. He was wise, diligent, and they know how to prepare for the future. Okay. Pick us up, Jack. The ant knows.
The ant knows the cold winter is always coming. The first verses of Ruth introduce us to a difficult winter season. There are at least two things we can learn for our lives from this passage.
What's the first verse say in Luke? Charlie, you got your Bible open?
On my phone.
You got Ruth up?
Yeah.
He said, and Ruth.
Read it for us, Charlotte. The first verse in Ruth.
Wait, no, I don't have that one.
Oh, you don't have it? Okay.
Chapter 1.
In the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him.
Okay, so the first verse opens up. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine, right? And so then this is what the author is making mention of, that we have some winter in our lives, right? Go ahead, Jack.
Don't be surprised by suffering and confusion.
Mm-hmm.
The story begins with a famine in the land. Elimelech, Naomi, and their 2 sons are compelled to leave their home in Bethlehem to find food.
Mm-hmm.
This is ironic because Bethlehem means house of bread in the Hebrew language. How desperate the famine must have been for them to abandon their community and property to search for livelihood in a foreign land.
Mm-hmm. That's important. We're going to come back to that they abandoned their home and property to look for food and a way of life. The important thing about this is that they left the place where the symbol is bread. The name of Bethlehem was the symbol of bread, right? Symbol of being fed. Bread always represents Jesus. He says that I am the bread of life, right? And so then they have to leave this plenteous place. Why did they have to leave?
To search for livelihood.
To search for livelihood. What brought on the famine?
Their disobedience.
Their disobedience. And so then Israel was disobedient in Bethlehem. And so then the Lord always, in the Old Testament, he would use famines to correct the Israelites. And so then they had to leave. The author tells us that it was so severe that they had to leave home, right? They didn't leave on their own. They had to survive. Okay. All right. Jackie, keep it where we're at.
After arriving in Moab, Elimelech and his two sons probably began working as laborers or shepherds. Each day they get up early, work all day, and then receive a daily wage at the end of the day. A day without work means there is no pay for that day. Naomi would have stayed home to do the hard work of preparing food from scratch, fetching water, and 100 other necessary chores. The family is stuck in a daily struggle to survive.
I don't know if we ever been stuck in a struggle to survive. What you say, Sean? I agree. Yeah, it gets like that sometimes. That all we could do is just try to survive and wait on the Lord's help. And so then this was their case. They were stuck just in their daily lives trying to survive. All right. And so let's see what happened.
Occluded Elimelech and Naomi's feelings about their lives show up in the names they give their sons. They named their first son Mahlon, meaning sickly, and they named their second son Chilion, meaning failing. The family's life goes from famine in Israel to hard labor in Moab. That is difficult by any standard.
The names of the two kids. One was named Mahlon, and the other one Chilion, right? And their names meant sickly. So that meant that at birth they had some problems. In the ancient time, they would name their children in what was going on at the time, and they would look at the child and perceive things about the child, and that's where they got their name from, is the perception that the parents had of them when they were born. It's not like we do now. We have different names for our kids that really don't mean anything. Tay and those kind of names don't really mean too much. And so these in these times when they named you, it meant something, right?
Right.
And so then one was sickly and the other one was what? Failing. And so then that's a terrible thing. And we'll see later on that Naomi changes her name, right? She tells us, don't call her Naomi. And we'll see that later on because of her circumstances. She wants to change her name. Okay, Sister Jack.
Then one day, Elimelech suddenly dies. Since the family remains in Moab, we can guess the famine is continuing in Bethlehem. In time, the two sons marry local girls. Certainly, these two girls would have come from the poorest families in Moab. Who else would have allowed their daughters to marry impoverished foreigners? This Israelite family is putting down roots in Moab. with no apparent plans to return to Bethlehem. 10 years pass, then what inconceivable tragedy strikes?
So after Elimelech dies, his sons marry into the Moabite tribe, and they get two women, and these women are Naomi and Ruth, right? And then so they settle down, and 10 years pass, right? And then what happened, Jack?
Both of Naomi's sons die.
And so then in 10 to 15 years, they had how many deaths?
Two.
No, three.
Or
Uh,
three.
am I hearing someone?
The father.
I said 4, but it said Naomi said 2 sons and husband.
2 sons and the father, Ilana. Two sons and the father. So they have 3 deaths within 15 years, right? And so then the title of our lessons is, right, the chaos of tragedy, right? And so this is a tragic situation, having 3 deaths in the span of 15 years. And so then in this time, in the time of Naomi and Ruth, women wasn't supposed to be without a man. It was hard for them to survive without a man because of the ruralness of the countryside and the hard work. Plus, the Lord didn't set it out like that for women to have to work. They were supposed to take care of the home and the children and raise the children. And so then this tragedy sets in. Okay, Jackie? Though she is not aware at the time.
Though she is not aware at the time, this is the low point of Naomi's life. She is in a desperate place indeed. In 2 Corinthians 1:8b, the Apostle Paul explains being caught in a desperate situation. We were pressed out of measure, above strength, and so much that we despaired even of life. However, what happens when they put their faith in God, according to verse 10a?
1 Corinthians chapter 1,
2 Corinthians.
verse 10a.
This is 2 Corinthians. God delivers them from deadly trouble.
Okay. And so then, Jackie, in the verse, we were pressed out of measure about strength, inasmuch that we despaired even of life. What does that say?
That they were suffering. They didn't know if they were going to survive.
Okay. No, you're quite right. They were suffering, and they started to even think about taking their lives because of their suffering. And so then they said, we despaired even of life. They had considered suicide. And so then, but the Lord is always, but the Lord, he has delivered us again. So we always have to think that the Lord is not delivering us just one time. He always is delivering us, right? Mm-hmm. From such a deadly peril. It's always that the Lord is on our side. And so then we might despair, but we always have to think that the Lord knows what's best for us. And so just like Naomi and Ruth, they didn't give up, right? They kept on going. They kept on living. And so then And then we'll see that they were delivered. The bottom of page 8.
We should not be surprised when God leads us into a season of suffering and confusion. He wants our faith in him to be strong, and nothing strengthens our faith in God like having everything on sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, ye may be glad also with exceeding joy.
Okay, so why does the Lord send us into some kind of despair? Sometimes what is he trying to accomplish in us?
Faith and strength.
Huh?
To strengthen our faith.
To strengthen our faith. Right. To strengthen our faith. And what you say, Sister Gail?
Our reliance on him.
And our reliance on him, right? The Lord wants us to rely on him. The Lord wants us to always have him present in our lives. And so then he could guide us, right? And he knows that putting us in vicarious situations brings us to him, right? Because otherwise we think that we could do it on our own, right? And so then he brings these situations, these things upon us to strengthen our faith. Sister Kim, can you pick us up at Abram?
Abram and Sarah told God, God told them to leave their country and their family to go to the land where I will show you, Genesis 12. God promised them descendants, but kept them childless until old age.
Okay, why do we have these examples here?
These were people that God promised something, or he told them to do something.
Okay.
And he brought it about. I mean, he was faithful to his word.
Okay, but now these are people that God told to do something, and
they didn't.
There you go.
Yeah,
And they right? They were obedient to it, right? It was stressful, some of it. It was tragic, some of it, right? But they were obedient, right? By faith, it says that Abraham and Sarah, right, had a child. Okay, what does it say about Abraham and Sarah?
That God told them to leave their country and their family and go to the land that I will show you.
Yeah.
And he promised them descendants, but kept them childless until old age.
Okay, so now we have to put ourselves in that situation. So if the Lord told us, all right, I want you to leave on next week and go to where I'll show you, but I want you to get in your car and start driving. What would happen? That's what you would do? All right. Okay. That's what we want to hear. What about Joseph?
God ordained Joseph to be betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely convicted of a crime, and forgotten for years in prison.
What is our key word in that?
God ordained him.
God ordained it. God ordained it. So God had already set it up for him to do what?
Be betrayed. Sold into slavery.
To be sold.
Falsely convicted of a crime.
Be convicted of a crime.
And forgotten for years in prison.
And forgotten. God ordained that. My goodness. I mean, our humanness would say, what kind of God is that?
Child.
Wow. But our thing is that we can't question God. Or see, we have to trust him. We have to trust him. And you, huh?
He's sovereign.
Right, he's sovereign. Right. And Joseph is a real good example of that, because you don't never hear about Joseph saying, why are you doing this to me? Or what did I do? He goes along with it, right? The scholars say that Joseph is a picture of Jesus, right? That it never said that Joseph sinned, but all these things happened to him. And see, and then all of these are word pictures of Christ, what he had to go through, right? He had to leave home, right? He left heaven for us, right? He was thrown in prison for us, right? And so then all of these are word pictures of what Christ will do for us and has done for us. And so what about Moses, Sister Kim?
God ordained Moses to be shaped from wealth into a wilderness at 40 years of age, Exodus 11, to lead Israel out of Egypt at 80 years old, Exodus 12, and then to wander in the wilderness until he died at 120 years old, Deuteronomy 34.
Goodness gracious. So Moses leaves wealth, right? Goes into the wilderness and stay in the wilderness for 40 years, right? And then when he was 80 years old, the Lord told him, get up and come and lead my people out of Egypt, right? And then after the Lord told him to lead the people out of Egypt, he leads them around for another 40 years in the wilderness. What kind of God is that? It's a sovereign God. It's a God that knows the end from the beginning. It's a God that builds our faith and our trust in him, and then blesses us when we come to the point of knowing him in that way, right? Sister Jackie, read David.
God anointed David to become the king of Israel as a boy, but then allowed King Saul to persecute him for over a decade.
How long is a decade?
10. 10 years, right?
Sister Charlotte said it's a long time.
It's 10.
10 years.
Huh?
10 years.
Very good. A decade is 10 years. And so then David got anointed as king as a child, but it took 10 years for him to become king, right? And so he knew that he was supposed to be king, and he was wondering, when am I going to be king? You know? And so it's all in God's timetable. Esther?
God ordained Esther's family to be exiled into a foreign country. Both of her parents died. She was then compelled to marry a pagan king. Finally, she had to risk her life to save her people. Esther 1-10.
So sometime when God ordained you, it causes you to have to be in dangerous situations. It calls you even to have to risk your life, right? And so then that's what the Hebrew boys did, right? At the furnace fires, they said, King, we're not going to serve you, even if it means that we have to die, right?
Yeah.
And so what did the king do?
Throw 'em in there.
He threw them in there, right? And then what did God do?
He put it out.
He protected them,
Yeah,
right?
they was in there praising.
Huh?
But they was in there praising him.
We on fire for the Lord. That's it. And that's how we supposed to be. We're supposed to be on fire for the Lord, right? And so then he protects them even in a grave situation where it might cost your life, right? Okay, what about and then Jesus? No, Jesus.
Daniel.
Huh?
We're on Daniel.
Oh, we're on Daniel?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Daniel.
God ordained Daniel to be exiled and separated from his family. He was then forced to serve a pagan king and thrown into a lion's den for praying to his God.
Mm-hmm. So Daniel would worship the Lord 3 times a day. He would pray out of his window. And so the people wanted to get rid of him. Some of his adversaries wanted to get rid of him. And so then they went and told the king that he should have a day to where everybody worship him. And the king thought that was a good idea. And so then he said he ordained a day that on this day everybody gonna worship me. And so Daniel didn't do it. Right. And so the king said they went back and told the king Daniel ain't worshiping.
He said, "You're not my Jesus."
Huh? Yeah.
You're not my Jesus.
Right. Yeah. And so then Daniel didn't worship, and so the king had to put him in the lion's den reluctantly, because the king liked him, but he had to stick with the law that he had made. And so then he put Daniel in the lion's den. And then what happened?
Nothing. The lion wasn't even hungry. He wasn't even hungry.
And so then what happened to the men that put him in there?
They burnt up.
They
They ended up.
Yeah. So instead of the Daniel being eaten by the lions, the king threw the men in, and the lions got hungry and ate them. And so then that's a picture of persistence. Daniel was persistent in his worship of the Lord, and he didn't let nothing deter him. And so then he was rewarded by being the prince of the kingdom after that. Wasn't nobody higher than him except the king. Okay. And then we come to our Lord. What happened to Jesus?
How does Isaiah 53 verse 5 describe the dark, desperate valley through which God led Jesus?
My goodness.
And I have, but he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities.
Mm-hmm.
The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed.
Mm-hmm. And when we say that he was, one version says that he was pierced, right, for our transgression, or wounded. Where did they pierce him, or where did they wound him? In the side, right? In the side. And what else? Where else?
His head.
Huh? There you go. In his hands. And where else?
In his feet.
Can y'all hear me?
What'd you say, Jackie?
In his feet.
In his feet. So he got pierced in the side with a sword. He got nails in his hands. And then he got nails in his feet, right? And that was for who? That was for us. And then he got beaten till where you couldn't recognize him, right? And so with his stripes, we are healed, right?
Right.
That should have been us being beaten. That should have been us being wounded. And so he took our place. And that's called what?
Love. Redemption.
That's called redemption. And so then that's what the Lord done for us. He redeemed us back unto himself. And so then this book of Ruth is a picture of redemption. We'll see it throughout the whole lesson that this is a picture of redemption, a word picture of redemption. Sister Kim, pick us up at the bottom of the page.
The Apostle Peter explains it like this. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, as though some strange thing has happened unto you. But rejoice in so much as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. 1 Peter 4:12-13.
So now, how do we supposed to think when diverse temptations or things happen to us that's unexplainable.
You're supposed to think that it's not strange, that it should be expected.
There you go. It should be expected, right? It should be expected because we are what with Christ? We are partakers. And so then what did Christ do? Christ suffered, and so then we're partakers of that suffering, right? That's the least that we could do is be partakers after he did it, right, for us. And so then we become partakers of the suffering, but it's always a rainbow at the end of the suffering. What does it say? That when what?
His glory shall be revealed, that we may be glad also with exceeding joy.
Okay, so without any suffering, there'll be no glory, right? He says it says that if we want to be when his glory is revealed and we want to be partakers of that, right? We want to be exceedingly glad. And so then how do we become partakers? What is our part in this?
Stand the word.
To stand firm throughout whatever it is.
Can you hear me?
All right.
The Lord with it.
You want to stand firm. We also want to be witnesses, right? We also want to, the Bible tells us to work out our own salvation, right? With fear and trembling. We want to be partakers. So the Lord, we studied a couple of weeks. When we get saved, the Lord gives us three things, right? And one of them is a purpose. And so then for us to be partakers of Christ, we have to find our purpose, right? And so then when we do that, we find out what our spiritual gifts are, right? And then we have them develop, and then we put them into action, right? And so then this is our part in partaking in the suffering of Christ. We become his servants. We become his witness, right? And so then we find out what our gifts are. We find out through the word of God and through study what the Lord requires of us, right? Sister Kim.
The Bible unmistakably declares that God will lead us through times of tragedy and chaos to test our faith. So we should never be surprised when they come upon us, as they did Naomi and her family.
All right. It's funny that we've been studying in this book, and we haven't come upon Ruth or Naomi yet. All right. Yeah, because the book is so much more than Ruth and Naomi. It teaches us so many other things, so many other facets about the book, and that's why the writer said at the beginning of the book it's a fascinating story of multiple dimensions of things. Right? It's a multiple dimensions. Just these 4 chapters have so much purpose in them, so much to offer, so much for us to learn. Okay. Be determined when difficult decisions arise.
With no means of survival, Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem, where the famine has ended. She knows many of the Israelites still follow the laws of Moses. The law demands that tithes of produce be stored up within the town. What is the purpose of these tithes according to Deuteronomy 14:28 and 29?
This is very good. This is the reason why we tithe, right? So we want to look at Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 28 and 29.
At the end of 3 years, thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and shalt lay it up within thy gates. And the Levite, because he hath no part nor inheritance with thee, and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all thy work, in all the work of thy hand, which thou doest.
Okay. So what was the reason for the tithe?
Be able to provide for strangers, fatherless, and
Yes.
the widows.
And someone else.
The stranger, fatherless.
The orphans,
Huh?
the Levites, the
Yes.
foreigners, and
Yes.
the orphans.
Yes. And who are the Levites? Yes. And who are the Levites? In the 12 tribes, the Levites are always the priests
12 tribes,
of the Israelites, right? And so then the Lord, when he distributed out a land for the 12 tribes, he left the Levites out.
And so then
He didn't give them nothing because
the Lord,
a man of God is supposed to be supported
out a
by the
land
people of God.
for the 12
And so
tribes.
then he didn't give the Levites nothing because he had ordained that they be taken care of by
a man
the people.
of God is supposed to be supported.
And so then, but look at the way the Lord does things. He provides for
the Levites.
Who else did it say?
Because he had ordained that they be taken care
The foreigner
of by
right?
the people.
And who else?
Right.
And the orphans.
And so then
The fatherless.
but look at
that's kids, right?
The way the Lord. Who else did it say?
He providing for everybody. Look,
the foreigner.
And this is how
right?
the Lord
That's
takes
kids,
care
right?
of us. This is a picture of that.
He providing for
and
everybody. Look, and this is how the Lord takes care of us. This is a picture of that.
Because
and
in that time, widows would have
and the widows, right? Because in that time,
they were considered the less
would have. They were considered
the people of.
They were considered the less the people of.
They were considered not to be even
less
worthy of talking about because there was a widow.
Considered not to be even what I was looking for. They considered them to be second class citizens because they were widows, right? In that time, and so then the Lord said, "No, we will provide for them," right? And so the Lord, you can see the Lord taking care of his own, right? The widow, the foreigner. So it makes no difference whether you were a Jew or not, right? If you were hungry, the Lord said to feed them. And so then this is what the tithe was about back then, that they would bring we read in the Bible where it says, bring all to the storehouse, right? So there'll be room enough, right? So and so that's what the Lord is talking about. Bring the tithes to the storehouse where we can distribute them to those who are in need, right? And that's what they did by tithing, and it also meant taking care of the priests. And so then that's why we have to take care of our pastor, because it's ordained of the Lord for us to take care of our pastor as he take care of us, right? So when he gives us spiritual things, we're supposed to give him physical things, right? Okay. And so let's go on.
However, Naomi sees no future for her daughters-in-law in Bethlehem. Surely no Israelite man would marry these Moabite women. Widowhood and poverty will be the future for Ruth and Orpah, if they return with Naomi. So she releases them from their obligation to her. What does she tell them in verse 8, B, C?
Before we read that, it says that Naomi is going to return back to where? Go back to Bethlehem. How far is that from Moab?
Like a thousand.
Uh, the reason why I ask that because they have to go at least 50 miles, right? At least 50 miles. And so then at night they had to build a fire. I'm saying this so you could see their determination, you could see their diligence, the things that they had to go through. They had to build fire, go through the wilderness, and then make sure that they don't get eaten by wild animals. And so they had to go that 50 miles. 50 miles probably would take 2 days or 3 days to get there, right? By foot. And so then they had to endure all of this. And so the Lord says to us, count it not strange when diverse temptations come upon you. And so then we get mad because we have to drive to the store.
I don't get mad.
Yeah.
I get
What?
happy.
Mm-hmm. Well, you different from most. And so most go, I gotta go to the store. We're just making the correlation of how they had it then and how we have it now. And we think it's strange that we have to do certain things. And so then, but the Lord tells us in James to count it all joy. Yeah. And so then that's what we should be doing, and counting it joy, because after we see what these women had to go through, the difficulties and the tragedies they went through, it really makes us think of our own situations, right? That things ain't bad as they seem. Okay. And what's our answer?
She told them to go to their mother's house, and she hoped the Lord deal kindly with them. She hoped the Lord deal with them kindly. She told them to return to their mother's house.
Okay. Let's read from the answer. We got it up on the screen. Read it.
Go return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me.
Mm-hmm. So Naomi points out that it would be best for you guys to go back home, right? As she was saying, there's nothing further that I could do for you, right? And so this is important. And it says that the Lord deal with you kindly. She's given them her blessing, right? And then she acknowledges how they have dealt with her, right? Kindly, right? And then and she mentions the tragedy that took place with the deaths of the 3 men, right? And so then let's put ourselves in that situation. Would you rather go home?
Me? Yeah, I probably.
You see? Okay, so but then let's look at home. They had other gods, right? Yeah. See, so that's what we do sometimes when we're at home. We have other gods, right? And so then they had other gods, and they did things inappropriately, right? And so Ruth had the sense enough to see that it wasn't nothing for me at home, but this pagan worship, and I like how you worship your God, right? And we'll see that in a few minutes throughout the lesson. So sometimes we have to make difficult decisions, right? And so then the Lord always tells us to count the cost. And so this Ruth had counted the cost. She said, if I go back home, it's going to be bad because I'm a widow. I don't have nobody to take care of me. I'm going to have to go into this poverty. And she was listening. She was listening to her mother-in-law because it said that it was a law, right? That you were supposed to take care of the people who had property in your country, right? So Naomi left, but they left. I told you that was going to come into play. They left their property, right? Remember that's what it said. They left their property to find, right. And so then they had left their property, and so Naomi thinks about that and goes back home, right? And Ruth is listening to her and realizes it would be better for me to go with her because I don't have anything at home, right? Sometimes we have to leave home. We don't like to, but sometimes we have to. And so what happens?
Both Ruth and Orpah refuse to leave. A second time, Naomi urges them to go back, saying they can remarry Moabite husbands and have families. At this point, Orpah gives in and decides to go back to her people and to her gods. However, Ruth clings to Naomi and refuses to leave.
Mhm. And look at this. It says, and her gods, right? Look at that God. How's it spelled? With a little g, right? With a little g. And so then that's not the God of the ages. And so ultimately she decides to go back, right? Which was a bad decision, but we have to make these decisions. And so she made the wrong choice and Ruth made the right choice. And so we're gonna stop right there and pick it up next week at the top of page 11. But right now we want to show you some ways that you could be a blessing to our church and also to our pastor by giving. We're gonna show you how you can give. Jackie?
So we have various ways that you can give. You can send your tithes and offering in by mail. You can come in person, and you can also use our Zelle platform, which is cstoneNBC.finance@gmail.com. And then I can't see the last one.
And the Cornerstone app.
Or you can use our Cornerstone app.
Mhm.
So we thank everyone for joining us this morning for our Sunday school service. And we ask that you join us for our 11 a.m. service. And we thank you guys.
Amen. And we'll see you on next Sunday if the Lord says the same.